Hey, just a quick note to let you know that this video is a pre-recorded live event. If you'd like to join our upcoming events, such as demos and office hours, you can check out our schedule on our support page. Hope you find this video helpful and look forward to seeing you in our next event. All right, thanks to those that could join today's demo live, and welcome to any of you watching this video at a later date. So in today's demo, I'm going to be talking about behavior modifiers, what they are, some different use cases, when you might want to use them, when you might run into some challenges. So there are some limitations that you should be aware with modifiers. But before I jump into any of that, let's first start with what are behavior modifiers in ZooMonitor. So ZooMonitor is a tool you can record behavior. It's a very flexible tool. You can record behavior in a lot of different ways. And so one of those flexible ways you can record behavior is through the use of modifiers. And so basically what those are is additional details you can record on the primary behavior that you set up in ZooMonitor. So as we jump into ZooMonitor, you'll see kind of what that looks like, but it's just a quick example. If you were recording something like inactive behavior, you could have a modifier for is the animal alert and rest, for instance. So it's ways for you to record additional sort of details of a behavior. There are some limitations, though, to be aware of with modifiers. And the biggest one is that in ZooMonitor, the built-in reporting cannot analyze the data at the level of the modifier. So any of the built-in graphs, so the activity budget type graphs, any of the filtering that you might do in your heat map, something like that, those are all at the level of the primary behavior, not at the level of the modifier. So that's something to keep in mind kind of as you're building out your projects. And there really is honestly no right or wrong way to set up your project in terms of like what level of granularity you might put it at. I will say one thing to keep in mind is if you have a lot of behaviors that you've added to your project, there's going to be a lot of horizontal scrolling in the app, as you'll see. And so one use of modifiers is in those situations earlier, like with the example, inactive being alert and rest. That's a good case where you could set it up as inactive with those two modifiers, or you could set up two separate behaviors called alert and called rest. If you are analyzing your data manually, certainly I don't think that there's any limitation in you using the modifiers. Certainly it can clean up the recording screen for you. And I would recommend, it would make sense in that scenario. However, if you are looking to lean on those built-in reports in ZooMonitor and use that primarily to get some of the insights out of your data, you would probably want to make sure then you're limiting your use of modifiers and really focusing on those primary behaviors and how you set up your projects. Okay, and also I should mention as we jump into this, so I'm next going to jump into the app. You'll get to see the different types of modifiers, and so there are four different types of modifiers. So you can have a comment box, so like a text box that can come up. So you record a behavior and you want to add like a free note. You can also have a behavior modifier, which is what we call it. That would be the example earlier of the alert and rest as modifiers of inactive. So you can have a behavior modifier. You can also have a social modifier. And so a social modifier is if you were to click a behavior, so inactive, not a social behavior. Let's say it was something like affiliative behavior, right? You might want to know who that affiliative behavior was with, right? And so in that situation, you would probably have something like a behavior modifier, possibly for initiator or recipient, right? And then you would also want to know who the interaction was with, what other individual in that social group. And so that's where a social modifier can come in handy, is if you toggle on that social modifier, you'll then get the list of modifiers to be the list of animals that you've added to your project there. And so you automatically would have that updated with the group of animals that are set up on your project. You would have that automatically listed as modifiers. You wouldn't have to then manually go in and add each of them as if they were a behavior modifier. And the fourth one there is a space use modifier. And so with a space use modifier, you can click a behavior and then you can plot in the habitat where it occurs. 2 of those modifiers are restricted to only all occurrence recording. And you'll see that in a second when I jump into that. So with the comment, the text box modifier, and with the space use modifier, those are both restricted to all occurrence recording. So I think with that, let's just jump into the app and we can actually see what those modifiers look like in action. All right, here we are in ZooMonitor. So I'm going to sign in. I'm going to go to a project called Modifier Demo for us today. And I'm going to start a new session. Of course, to no one's surprise, these are our pygmy hippos. So we are going to be watching our amazing Annie. So I'm going to start this session. We have Annie here. And this is a 1-minute session, so this is going to go fairly quick. And I'll probably run through this a few times. So the first couple modifiers here on all occurrence, I mentioned that comment text modifier. Here's that, right? So you can see I can just add in a note. This is a comment. And then you can click save and it'll record that text that you type in. And so that's a nice way if you're trying to add notes during a session. That's a way to do it. And so we usually create this sort of fake behavior that we call general comment. You can call it whatever you want, notes, comment, and set it up with that text modifier. The other all occurrence one here I have on this project here is agonistic interaction. And so you can see there's some different modifiers here. So I have all 3 types, all 4 types actually. So there is the initiator. This is a behavior modifier. So initiator, recipient, and unclear is how I have it set up. Then you can click the social modifier. You can add in text if you want. You don't have to. And then I also have the behavior modifier. So you can put where did that behavior occur. So let's plot that it occurred there. It's not going to let me do that because the session just ended. So let me go back and restart this session and I can do this again. So you can see the different types of modifiers. So this is our behavior modifier. This is our social modifier. So these automatically got pulled in from the animals that are added to the project. And then this is our map. So you can plot where that behavior occurred, and then you can click save. And it saved all of that information, all of the behavior, and then all of those modifiers that you recorded. And so keep in mind, like I said, the text box and then that map are specific to all occurrence. For interval recording, you don't really need a space use modifier because you can record data through interval space use. And so if you were to plot the animal's location, it's already attached to your interval here. And so as a quick example here, so you can see with Annie, I have 3 behavior modifiers set up on this behavior. So I have alert rest. I have as well, what posture is she in? Is she standing, sitting, or lying? And then I also just threw on a nearest neighbor modifier. She contact, proximate, distant. Completely hypothetical. Generally, social proximity we set up as a separate channel, but just wanted to kind of give an example of what this could look like with multiple levels of modifiers here. You are limited in ZooMonitor to 3 behavior modifiers. And sometimes when people first start using ZooMonitor, when they hear that, they think I'm referring to something like this. You can only have 3 choices. That's obviously not the case. This could be as many, if there was a lot more postures that you wanted to set up, you could certainly set those up. There's no limitation in how many choices you can have within a modifier. You are just limited to 3 types of modifiers as you're setting it up. And one other thing to note here, one key difference too in how modifiers work versus these behaviors. So with these behaviors, if I were to click inactive, right, it would score inactive. But then let's say I clicked feeding foraging, it would score feeding foraging instead, right? So the behaviors here at the channel are mutually exclusive. You're only recording one behavior from this list. If they're, eating and walking, you have to have a behavioral priority in your ethogram as you set up your project to decide what is more important for your questions. Do you want to record walking or do you want to record eating? That is not the case here for modifiers, right? So you can actually score multiple modifiers. So let's say they're eating, and let's say they maybe do have fruit and hay and maybe lettuce in their hand. So you can actually record all 3 of those there and click save. So there isn't that requirement at the level of the modifier there. So just one other thing to note about how modifiers work. So those are some really quick examples of what modifiers look like as we're recording them. Let's jump into admin really quick and we can see how they are set up. Okay, so I have our modifier demo project here. And so I'm going, of course, to our behaviors tab. And then we have our 3 recording types here: all occurrence, interval, and continuous. And you can see those 2 all occurrence behaviors that I just showed in the demo. I have here affiliative. I changed the name for that. So general comment and then that social interaction there. So let me go ahead and edit general comment, and you can see sort of how that's set up. So the behavior name, I just typed in general comment. That's what we call it at Lincoln Park Zoo. Like I said, you can call those anything you'd like. And if you were to go to behavior modifiers, you see there's no behavior modifiers I have set up. So those behavior modifiers are those things like the alert rest that you would maybe specify. This is under additional modifiers here. And so you can see with an all occurrence behavior, there's a few extra choices here. So there's this comment box, which is turned on. And there's also that space use modifier, which I had mentioned here. And these 2, like I've said, are specific to all occurrence recording there. So for this general comment, we have that comment box turned on. And then for this affiliative interaction, this one, if you remember, it had basically every type of modifier. So you can see I have one behavior modifier here. So I have that directionality, initiator, recipient, unclear. I didn't set up other modifiers. You totally don't have to. And another thing to note too is the use of modifiers is completely optional. You do not need to use behavior modifiers at all. We have a number of projects where we probably don't have any behavior modifiers set up. So it's a completely optional way to get additional information on your behaviors there. Sorry, let me go ahead and click this one. So I showed the behavior modifier there. You can see I also have that social modifier turned on. So when that's turned on, it's going to pull everybody in the group. There's the comment box that's turned on, and then there is the space use modifier that's also turned on. And like I've said, these are specific to all occurrence. So when we jump to an interval behavior here, so let's go to that inactive behavior we were talking about earlier. You can see when you're looking at inactive behaviors and you're setting those up or editing them in this case, those options aren't available. So the comment box and the space use modifier are not available here for an interval behavior. And so for this inactive behavior, this is an example where I showed all 3, the use of 3 behavior modifiers here. So you can see I set that one up for attention. I have choices alert rest, posture, standing sitting, standing sitting lying, and then nearest neighbor, contact proximate distant. And for these behavior modifiers, the way you make these choices, it's just comma separated string. So if I had another one, alert rest, let's say maybe somewhere between alert and rest, maybe they're daydreaming. You can add that in. You can have spaces, of course, in your modifier. There's really no limit. You can do a space after the comma. It will automatically trim that leading space off of your behavior. So certainly you can do that. You don't have to necessarily enter it like that right after the comma. And then another thing to note here too is the behavior modifier category name. So you see attention, posture, and nearest neighbor. Those actually don't come out in the export of your data at all. You can see them when you're recording on the recording screen. You saw that they were sort of on that header row in the app, but those aren't available when you export your data. So just keep that in mind. You'll probably be able to recognize what behavior is in that modifier column, but they are not in the export there. And then one other thing that I wanted to note really quick, and this is kind of a very specific use case with modifiers, but I mentioned earlier with that social modifier, you could turn on that social modifier and then we'll include all the animals in your project. So let's say we have Annie, Pogo, and Howie I've added to this project. So that's why those are the 3 choices that came up. With 3 choices, that's probably a very clean scenario. You can probably manage that. However, if you have something like penguins or you have a species with large fission fusion type groups, it can get pretty messy when you're recording the data. So when we were to jump back into the app, let's see. So in this example here with our African penguin demo project, we have a lot more African penguins, but in this example project here, we just have 6 animals. So you can see if you had 6 animals, let's say maybe only 3 are in the group today. maybe this is a separate group. If it's, let's say, chimpanzees and they're doing like a fission fusion sort of management, you might only have a few animals in the group. When you click that behavior with that social modifier, it's going to give you all of the choices here, not just obviously the 3 in the group. And if you were to say, I'm just watching Ajay, it still is going to give you all the choices. So it's not, this only limits who you're observing. It doesn't limit the choices in your social modifier. However, there is a way to do that if you do want to limit, let's say today it's only Ajay, Madiba, and Pilchard in the group, and Sunny, TJ, and Harvey should not be selected, should not even be available to select. You can do that through this adjust session settings. And you have a choice here to specify your social group. And so if you click that, you'll see by default, everybody is available. And so this is where you can modify your social modifier. So if you do have that situation with Ajay, Madiba, and Pilchard are the only ones available, you can select those 3 individuals, leave the other 3 deselected, and then that's it. And then you're good to go. And so when you record behavior now, you click that behavior with those modifiers, only those individuals would come up and be choices for you. So it's a little bit more work to configure it like that, but with that sort of situation, you won't know who's in the group possibly until you start the session anyway. So it is something that you're sort of making a change as you start the sessions. Okay, so with that, I've kind of showed how they're set up in admin. I've shown some of those scenarios. Let me jump over and just show kind of what the data looks like here when it gets exported. So this is an export of some ZooMonitor data. If you're familiar with the export, this should look pretty familiar here. We have a column over here for channel type. Let me make some of these a little bit bigger. We have our channel type, interval, all occurrence, and then we have our subject type. So this project that we were looking at was only individual recording. And then we have Annie. Here's who we were recording on. And then, so let's say I'm going to expand some of our all occurrence. So this is not the data that you just saw me record. So that one general comment I had isn't in here. Let's say I did have that in here. So I actually did, in this example data, have a comment that I added here. I wrote, here is a comment. So for these 2 general comments, I wrote, here's a comment, and then woo. Those you can see here get exported in a column called all occurrence comment, right? And then every single one of your behavior modifiers and your social modifier get separate columns here. So this is your behavior modifier 1, 2, and 3, and then your social modifier here. And then same sort of thing for interval recording. It's at the level, of course, of your channel. So if you set up some modifiers for your first interval channel, some behaviors on that channel, you'll have your interval channel 1 value. That's the primary behavior that you set up on the project. So inactive, feeding, foraging. This is a behavior modifier 1, behavior modifier 2, and 3. And so you can see for this inactive, that's the one that we had set up, and we had all 3 of those set up here. You can see what it looks like. So it basically puts all of that data on a single line. These couple columns here at the end are not part of what you would be exporting, but I wanted to show kind of as an example how you might analyze some of this data. So I think one of the most obvious ways to analyze this data is to sort of set up an additional column to the right of your data that kind of concatenates these values. So you could have something like alert, sitting, contact. This should be an inactive alert, sitting, contact there. And then feeding, foraging. This would be feeding, foraging dash fruit dash fruit, comma lettuce. So you can concatenate those values there. Ignore these formulas. You can see I still am tweaking and fixing some of this formula here. And so once you have this behavior here with these modifiers, I would then probably recommend you could just analyze it as you probably would with your like pivot tables and stuff like that. And I have a demo available on how to use pivot tables that goes through calculating like percents of time and stuff with that data. So I would sort of just replace, instead of using this column here to be pivoting your data on and looking at, you would be basically using this new column you set up. And the other thing to keep in mind is when you copy and paste in your data, if you do add some additional columns there, I probably would recommend a good practice is maybe like color those columns so you remember these are not part of what's getting exported from ZooMonitor. So when you export new data into the sheet, it's going to be here, and then you'll have to go over here and drag down those formulas to cover that data range there. So that's a pretty simple way to kind of do it in Excel there. I hope you found this video helpful, and look forward to seeing you in our next event. All right, thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like that video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to be notified when we release more videos. If you have any questions about ZooMonitor, you can always feel free to contact us at ZooMonitor@lpzoo.org. Thanks.